Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Deep and Effective Big Book Study. I'm your host, a recovered alcoholic. Man, I'm so excited to be bringing you guys another episode today. And this is going to be episode 14, which is going to be part 2 of We Agnostic, also part 2 of step 2. We're going to be wrapping up step 2 today. And as always, my friends, we'd like to take a minute and invite God into this. And, I like to read the set-aside prayer. And if you care to join along, that's great. If not, I'll just go ahead and lead us in prayer. So let's take a quick moment of silence, and I'll lead us. God, please help me set aside everything I think I know about myself, my disease, the 12 steps, and especially you, so I may have an open mind and a new experience with all these things. Please help me to see the truth. Okay. All right, guys, so we got God into this. Started off right. As always, if you're new to the channel, I really appreciate you being here. And if you haven't had an opportunity to please subscribe, like, and share, it will help with the channel's growth and we can get the word out to more people. I'm going to drop in my email here. It's recoveredalcoholic1939@gmail.com. If you got questions, comments, concerns, anything I can help you with, by all means, don't hesitate. Also, that email, if you're looking for sponsorship, both men and women, guys, I can take you through this work, help you with a spiritual experience. Ladies, I can get you hooked up with some other women in the rooms who are very strong in the solution, so don't hesitate. We have a lot of stigma that attached to that only men can help the men and women can help them. That's not true. See, because when I started to understand that all the ladies in the rooms are my sisters and not potential dates, that I could start to be of more service to them. So just something to think about. And this is the Deep and Effective Big Book Study. So let's go to page 25, guys. And I will read verbatim from the book, so we can all know where we get the name of the channel. The great facts is just this and nothing less. That we've had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and toward God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is that the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves. All right, so, I always drop in a couple meetings that I attend regularly, right? One is on Thursday. It's an all-men's step study. We meet Thursdays at 6 p.m. Central. Here is the Zoom code and password. Also, Sundays at 6 p.m. Central is a men and women's meeting that I attend. And again, all business, all solution big book study. Here's the password, or here's the code and password here. And I just recently got introduced to a new meeting on Friday mornings at 8 Pacific time that I'm really, really starting to fall in love with. Again, it's a big book study, and it's all business. And I don't attend nonsense meetings. That's just the bottom line. I don't waste my time anymore. I only attach myself with groups and media and people who are looking for solutions. So here's the Zoom code and password for this meeting. Like I said, it's 8 a.m. Pacific time, and I promise you show up to any of these 3 meetings, you won't be disappointed. Okay, guys, so we got all that out of the way. Let's get right down to business. So this is going to be part 2 of step 2, right? We're going to be finishing up chapter We Agnostic and actually going all the way to page 60, right? One of the misconceptions is that step 2 ends at the end of the chapter of We Agnostic, and that's not true. Step 2 goes all the way to page 60 right after the ABCs, and we're going to be addressing that in detail here in a few minutes. And, if you listen to the last episode of step 1, we went all the way up to page 50, the top of 51. So that's kind of where we want to pick up and go from there. So I'm not going to beat up page 51 too much, not going into too much detail, right? These are things for the individual to be reading for themselves and help determine, right? Helping them with their conceptions and help their determinations on, how they're going to move forward with this thing. So, but I do want to go pick up on page 52 in the middle of the page there. We're going to read something so vitally important, and we're going to read about the bedevilments. And guys, when I came into Alcoholics Anonymous, I had no idea what the word bedevilment was, right? When I read this chapter and studied the book, I was like, I don't know what it is. So, but I'm a guy who totally believes in having a dictionary handy, especially a era-relevant dictionary on hand when I'm studying the literature, right? So if we look in our little handy dandy big book dictionary and we look up bedevilments, it just simply means torments. So, and the reason I'm telling you this definition is because we're about to read this word, and it'll lend more depth to the paragraph when I understand that this is what my torments are. This is what's torturing me. So let's pick up, here we go, page 52 in the middle of the page. It says, we had to ask ourselves, why shouldn't we apply our human problems the same readiness to change our point of view, right? And this paragraph I'm about to read, I've heard many times referred to as untreated alcoholism. And I got to tell you, I'm torn between that, because the reality of it is what we're about to read is this is the human experience. The spiritual malady is not limited to the alcoholic, right? And it even says right here, our human problems. It didn't say alcoholic problems. So this is what we all suffer from. It just so happens that the alcoholic is an extreme example of this. So I'll read now. So ask yourself, can you answer these questions successfully? It says, we were having trouble with our personal relationships. We couldn't control our emotional natures. We were prey to misery and depression. We couldn't make a living. We had a feeling of uselessness. We were full of fear. We were unhappy. We couldn't seem to be of real help to other people. Was not the basic solution of these bedevilments. So I'm going to stop right there, right? So here's the thing, guys. Just because I quit drinking or just because I'm sober doesn't mean that I'm not still prey to every one of these examples. I have a decade of sobriety, but I can still experience these things in my life because this is the essence of the spiritual malady. This is what I need to be treating, right? And this is what I use the steps for. And when I talked about it's not just limited to the alcoholics, this is the human experience. Because here's the reality of it, is I know people who have never had a drink or a drug in their entire lives, but yet their lives look exactly like this paragraph. So it's not limited to just us. Listen to the next paragraph. It says, when we saw others solve their problems by the simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas didn't work, but the God idea did. Well, again, who are these others? We saw others solve their problems. Well, they're talking about recovered alcoholics. This is who we're talking about. And then it says that our ideas didn't work. We had to stop doubting the power of God because our ideas didn't work. Well, that's going to automatically cross-reference me to page 62. When they said this is the how and the why of it, first of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. See, this is my problem right here. Our ideas don't work. My ideas didn't work. But now I am convinced through experience that the God idea does. And they go on to talk about, some examples of how we all can convince ourselves how smart we are and our egos are superior and all these great examples. So I'm not going to go into too much detail about that. But I will want to pick back up on 53 in the middle of the page. I'm going to read what's known as the step 2 proposition, right? And in the last episode, I talked about there's 4 examples of what I call the essence of step 2, right? And we talked about it in the last episode, is that the reality, the simplest way we can actually explain step 2 is that do I believe I'm step 1, right? Especially when I study the words, right? When we go to step 1 and we see the 2 parts that is step 1, we understand about powerlessness and we understand about unmanageability, which is powerlessness and insanity, right? I take those 2 words and I move them straight down into step 2. We see the repetition, right? Step 2 is about getting power and getting restored to sanity. So the essence of step 2 in reality is that do I believe I'm step 1, right? And I'm going to read it right here. Here's another example. When we became alcoholics, crushed by self-imposed crisis, right? This is about step 1. Do I believe that I am crushed? Yes or no? Do I believe I'm hopeless? Do I believe I'm powerless? These are the questions we need to be asking the newcomer and ourselves to be successful with step 2. We could not postpone or evade. We had to fearlessly face the proposition, right? This is the step 2 proposition, that either God is everything or else he is nothing. God either is or he isn't. What is your choice to be? See, there's a question mark right there. This is what we need to be sitting down with the newcomer and talking about. And listen to the next sentence of the paragraph, the next paragraph. Arrived at this point, we were squarely confronted with the question of faith. So, right here, right now, here's the question. I'm going to squarely confront you. What's it going to be? Either God is everything or he is nothing. Because if he is nothing, you will not be successful in recovery. We couldn't duck the issue. Some of us had already walked far over the bridge of reason toward the desired shore of faith. The outlines of the promise of the new land had brought luster to tired eyes and fresh courage to flagging spirits. Friendly hands had stretched out in welcome. We were grateful that reason had brought us so far, but somehow couldn't quite step ashore. Perhaps we had been leaning too heavily on reason that last mile, and we did not like to lose our support. So this is me still trying to rely on my own power. This is what we're talking about. And this is where I'm squarely confronted, right? Am I going to step out of this delusional belief that I still have control and step into the reality is that I don't, right? This is a very pivotal moment in the program. So that was natural. But let us think a little more closely. Without knowing it, we had been brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith. Well, where have we been brought? Where are we standing? The word stood needs to be brought out and talked about. Right? Does anybody know? Well, when we jump over to page 59, they're going to tell us exactly where we're standing. And it just so happens to be right before the second step prayer. So let's listen to this. We stood at the turning point. That's what they're talking about on the bottom of page 53, where I've been brought to stand. I'm standing at the turning point, right? And here's the thing, that everybody's turning point is going to look different. It's unique and individualized, right? It might have been through the court system. It might have been through a treatment center. It might have been from your wife or husband kicking you out. The final straw that broke the camel's back, that is the turning point, where I decide that I cannot go on anymore living the way I'm living. Or did we not believe in our own reasoning? These are all questions. Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? What was that but a sort of faith? Right? Are we answering these questions successfully? Or are we just reading the book? Or are we studying the book? Yes, we've been faithful, objectively faithful to the God of reason. That's the God of intellect. That's what we're talking about. So in one way or another, we discovered that faith had been involved all the time. Right? I didn't think I had capacity for faith when I came in. But the reality of it is that me walking into my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous was me stepping out in faith. I don't know anything about the program, but I heard something about how you guys will help somebody that has a drinking problem. That's faith. Faith is what brought me to the rooms. So I'm going to jump over to 55, guys. But the rest of 54 and the top of 55, basically what they're going into is more examples of how my pride and my prejudice and my ego and all of these things can keep me closed-minded, right? Keep me in that state of everlasting ignorance, right? We talked about on page 45, right? Remember with the paragraph, lack of power, that is our dilemma. And they ask us those two questions, right? When it says, obviously, but where and how will we define this power, right? And then it says, well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself, which will solve your problem. And I went into great detail about this in the previous episode. But, those two questions that they asked. But where and how are we to find this power? Well, you're looking at the how right now on the screen, right? The wonderfully effective spiritual structure that we talk about on page 47. The letters H-O-W, W-H-O, the how. There it is. The how leads to the who, and who does the work. But then they ask the question, where? Where are we going to find this power? Well, that's what happens on page 55, and I'm going to read verbatim. Actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured by calamity, by pomp, by worship of other things, but in some form or the other, it is there. For faith in the power greater than themselves and miraculous demonstrations of that human lives are as fact as old as man himself. We finally saw that faith in some kind of God was a part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Remember, we've talked about this several times, that this God of my understanding, at bare minimum, has to be my friend. Sometimes we had to search fiercely, but he was there. Where is he? Deep down in it, deep down inside of us. He was just as much as fact as we were. And here it is. We found the great reality. And do you see how that's capitalized? Because they're talking about God. Deep down within us. And the last analysis is only there. It was so with us. So I'm going to take a minute and talk about this paragraph. So this is what the steps are designed to do. They're designed to break down the individual's ego enough ego deflation, and for humility to come in, for us to be able to turn our eyes inward. And this is where we're going to find God. So here, and this was a eureka moment for me. I spent my whole life looking for this God you guys kept talking about. Where is this God? Show me this God. Show me some power. So when I read the great reality deep down within us, right? It's in the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. Well, that was a eureka moment for me. I was like, oh my God, well, that makes sense. Because see, I've spent my entire life searching over there for something else. Whatever I needed, I never had. Wherever I was supposed to be, it wasn't where I was in that moment. I spent my entire life trying to fix an internal problem with external stuff. Can you relate to that? So when I found out where God was, I said, well, holy crap, that explains it. Because this is the last place I ever thought to look. And that's the thing about the steps. They're designed to give me enough ego deflation to break down my pride and my prejudice for me to turn my eyes inward, to see the reality, right? It's only there that I've found God. And here's what I still can do. I can still have that delusional belief that I can take from outside, something outside of myself, to give me validation, to fix me. And it's just never going to happen. We can only clear the ground a bit if our testimony helps sweep away any prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself. Again, where am I searching for all of this? Then, if you wish, that's a question you need to ask yourself. You can join us on the broad highway. Right? You have to determine that for yourself. Do you want to join us on the broad highway? You see how it's capitalized? With this attitude, you cannot fail. And what is the attitude? The attitude of willingness. Listen to this. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. So it's going to come to you. You're not going to go out there and find it, because it's not out there. It's in you. And here's another little side note, guys. You know, in the back of the book on page 567, we have what's known as the spiritual experience. And I'm going to turn there right now and read one little sentence out of there. And perhaps lend some more credibility to where God is. So listen to this. On the bottom of 567, the last sentence, and it goes on to the next page. With a few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. Inner resource. And I'll give you another little tidbit of where God is. Go to page 569. How many people out there have taken time to study the medical view of AA? Well, I'm going to read a little sentence out of this and tell me if you can't see where they're telling us where God is. Listen to this. On the bottom of the page, it says, I now conceive the psychiatrist's job to be the task of breaking down the patient's inner resistance so that which is inside of him will flower as under the activity of the AA program. Where's God? He's in me. And this is the only place that he's going to be found. Are you with me? I just find this to be such powerful information. Okay, guys, now we're going to start on the bottom of 55, and we're going to read the story of Fitz M. And he's the guy that wrote Our Southern Friend in the 4th edition. I highly recommend you go read it because he gives some great information, and he gives us a really good window into early Alcoholics Anonymous. So I'm going to read verbatim, right? Probably pretty much the rest of this chapter. So this is what Fitz has to tell us, right? In this book, you will read an experience of a man who thought he was an atheist. His story is so interesting that some of it should be told now. His change of heart was dramatic, convincing, and moving. Our friend was a minister's son. He attended church school, where he became rebellious at what he thought an overdose of religious education. For years thereafter, he was dogged by trouble and frustration. Business failure, insanity, fatal illness, suicide. These calamities in his immediate family embittered and depressed him. Post-war disillusionment, ever more serious alcoholism, impending mental and physical collapse brought him to the point of self-destruction, right? So Fitz talking about he's getting ready to have a first step experience, self-destruction. One night, confined in a hospital, he was approached by an alcoholic who'd known a spiritual experience. See how they didn't describe this alcoholic who's sober? No. They talked about an alcoholic who now has a relationship with God. Our friend's gorge rose as he bitterly cried out, "If there is a God, he certainly hasn't done anything for me." And boy, can I relate to that. But later alone in his room, he asked himself this question: is it possible that all the religious people I have known are wrong? While pondering, the answer he felt as though he lived in hell. Then, like a thunderbolt, the great thought came. It crowded out all else. They call it a great thought. Well, where do you think this great thought is coming from? Any quotation. Who are you to say there's no God? And the answer to that is nobody. This man recounts that he tumbled out of bed to his knees. In a few seconds, he was overwhelmed by a conviction of the presence of God. It poured over and through him, right? Where's God? He's in me. So this power is going to flow through us. With the certain majesty of a great tide at flood. The barriers he had built, just like me, all my barriers are a result of me, had built through the years were swept away. He stood in the presence of infinite power and love. He stepped from bridge to shore. For the first time, he lived in conscious companionship with his Creator. Thus, our friend's cornerstone was fixed in place, right? You're looking at the cornerstone right now, guys. It's the W. It's the willingness. That's the cornerstone. Page 47 talks about wonderfully effective spiritual structures. All these building metaphors. No later vicissitude has shaken it. And guys, y'all know what vicissitude means? I sure as hell didn't. But again, because I have the need for a dictionary in my life, I've now learned what vicissitude is, and I'm going to share it with everybody. Vicissitude is difficulty, hardships, change, or variation in life circumstances. So what he's telling us when he says that no later vicissitude has shaken it, he's talking about his foundation, right? His cornerstone. So life has showed up. No of life's hardships, trials, and low spots he talks about in Bill's story has shaken his foundation, his relationship with God. That's the thing. We have to be building this relationship on solid, firm bedrock. And it talks about that in the fifth step on the bottom of 75, right? His alcoholic problem was taken away that very night. The obsession to drink was removed from him. And the reason that it was is because he had that first step experience. It disappeared. That very night, years ago, it disappeared. Save for a few brief moments of temptation, the thought of drink has never returned. And at such times, a great revulsion has risen up in him. And that's my story too. Seemingly, he could not drink even if he would. God has restored his sanity. Not doorknobs, not light bulbs, not meetings, not sponsors, but God restored his. This is the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. What is this but a miracle of healing? Yet its elements are simple. Listen to this, guys. Circumstances made him willing to believe. Remember I was talking about these examples of the essence of step 2? Well, here's the third one. Circumstances made him, his pain made him willing to believe. His hopelessness made him willing to believe. Step 1 made him willing to believe. Step 1 automatically leads to step 2. especially when I understand what step 2 is about. He humbly offered himself to his maker, then he knew. He said he just doesn't, I can't just offer myself. I got to humbly. Right? So if I'm truly practicing humility, then there's actually want behind that. And then it says he humbly offered himself to his maker, then he knew. What did he know? What did Fitz know? Well, it takes me back to page 53. When we have our step 2 propositions. And it asks us this: God either is or he isn't. So what Fitz knew in that moment is that God is. Even so has God restored us all to our right minds. Again, who's restoring me to sanity? God. To this man the revelation was sudden. Some of us grow into it more slowly, but he has come to all who has honestly sought, have to honestly seek him. When we drew near to him, he disclosed himself to us. There's an exclamation point right there, guys. See, because I'm not going to go out and find God. Because he ain't out there. He's in me. And this has exactly been my experience. When I stopped and started to turn my eyes inward and look within myself, this is exactly what God did to me. He disclosed himself to me. I didn't find anything. And he revealed himself to me in his own unique, personalized way because he knew it would make sense to me. He knew I'd understand what was happening. Again, I've talked about this freedom, this permission that we get to go out and have our own personal, unique experiences with the God of our understanding. Okay, let's jump over to 58, guys. We are now in chapter 5. And like I said earlier, step 2 does not end at the end of 57. We're going to go all the way to 60. Let's look at the chapter title, my friends. How it works. You're looking at it on the screen. It's been hiding in plain sight the whole time. I hear it all the time in meetings. Well, I don't really understand how this program works. What do you mean you don't understand? We have an entire chapter that tells us exactly how it works. And if I'm able to practice honesty, open-minded, and willingness, or willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness, then I will be successful. It's that simple. Right? We read the word simple 18 times in the book. There's a reason for that. So I'm going to kind of read verbatim here, guys. And some of the most vital, pertinent information we read in just about every single meeting, right? We always read a portion of how it works in a meeting. And it gets so overlooked. But when I start to sit down and study, this very first paragraph tells me so much. And again, this is the very first boundary of sponsorship. It's the very first boundary of how I'm going to be successful in the program, because it's me meeting the requirement of step 1, which is honesty with humility. And I'm going to read. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. There are such unfortunates. They are not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Okay, time out. Let's talk about this first paragraph. Right? So, there is no great debate about relapse or slipping or whatever term we want to put to it. There is no great debate. There's no mystery to figure out. There's no psychological program I need to be figuring out of why I drink again. It tells me exactly. And here it is. So if you're the real alcoholic, like me, there's only one thing that will ever cause me to drink again. And it's right here in this paragraph. Is that I choose not to adopt a lifestyle that demands rigorous honesty. Right? The only thing that would cause me to drink again is if I stopped following these clear-cut, precise directions. It ain't got nothing to do with how many meetings I went to. It doesn't have anything to do with how many times I called my sponsor. It doesn't have anything to do with, well, I forgot to ask God to keep me sober today. I forgot to thank God at the end of the day for my sobriety. And how many people here know what rigorous means? Again, I didn't. So I'm going to define the word rigorous for us. Rigorous. Very strict, rigid, severe, exact, and flexible. That's the level of honesty that I have to be willing to strive for in order to be successful in recovery. My friends, if you're new here and you're struggling with this thing, I can guarantee you, you will never take another drink again if you're able to adopt the lifestyle of rigorous honesty. It will not fail you. Our stories disclose in a general way what we should be like, what happened, and what we are like now. So I'm going to stop here and I'm going to say something controversial, guys. And I'm not trying to belittle anybody here, but we hear a lot in meetings that we're supposed to be talking about what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. Or especially when we get to the podium and tell our stories. And I got to tell you, that's not what we're supposed to be doing. Because remember, and I forget which episode I talked about this, and when we determined who the we is, right? It's not us. It's not me and you. It was Bill, Bob, and the first 100. So when they hear and they said, our stories. So this is what they're doing, because this book is representing a member 12-stepping the newcomer. Right? Our book is crystal clear. The only time I'm ever supposed to be telling my stories is when I'm sitting down with the newcomer. Right? Bill Wilson told us in 1958 that the sole purpose of any AA meeting was to teach and practice the 12 steps. The meeting, we should be coming together and understanding that it's a classroom where we have teachers and students and teachers, and we have one textbook in common that we all share out of. The meetings aren't for war stories and drunker logs. The meetings are for us to be talking about the power of the program and how we've used it to overcome obstacles in life. I never go to a meeting and talk about my drinking. The next paragraph I'm about to read is 3 parts, and we need to break it down into 3 questions. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. So let's break that down into those 3 parts. So first of all, have you decided you want what we have? Yes or no? Then are you willing to go to any lengths to get it? Yes or no? Then you have to ask yourself, are you ready to take certain steps? So we have to determine what it is we have. What are we selling, right? So what we have, my friends, is not sobriety. What we have is recovery. What we have is God. So that's what you have to ask yourself. Have you decided that that's what you want? And then the next thing, are you willing to go to any length to get it? Because you're not going to get it unless you're willing to go to any length. And I talk about it in one of the episodes about what these links are. And then it talks about then you're ready to take certain steps. Ready means now. Are we going forward? Yes or no? I'll keep going. Some of these we balked. We thought we could find an easier, softer way, but we could not. With all the earnest at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. Some of us tried to hold on our old ideas, and the result was nil until we let go absolutely. And those are the links that we talked about, right? These links that I have to go to are letting go of my old ideas, because they will get me 0. I'll keep going. Remember that we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, powerful. Without help, it is too much for us. But there is one who has all power. That one is God. May you find him now. So what's the solution to alcoholism? Again, it's God. Half measures avail us nothing, right? I don't get to do 51% of the program and expect to get 51% of the results. It doesn't work that way. I have to go all in. And we talked about this a minute ago, right? We stood at the turning point. And here's the second step prayer, guy. How many people know that there's a step 2 prayer? There's a prayer for everything. Every step has prayers, right? And we read this in just about every meeting, and we're really paying attention. So here's the second step prayer, guys. We ask his protection and care with complete abandon, which means total surrender. So if I'm at that turning point, the turning point of step 1, hopelessness, then I'm going to ask for his protection and care with complete protection and care. That's what my God needs to be to me. Something that's going to protect me, something that's going to care for me. We see this word again, care, in the 3rd step, right? when we're going to turn our will and life over to the care of God. Then it says, here are the steps we took which are suggested as a program of recovery. I said, I'm not going to go through every step here, but I will say this and summarize the 12 steps. And let's look at what we have. So guys, whenever we want to talk about the steps as a whole, we always want to start with step 1. And I get it. But what we need to be thinking about is I need to be starting at 12. Because that's the final goal. The final goal of the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is to have a spiritual awakening so I can go carry the message to the newcomer, and then so I can learn how to practice these principles in all my affairs, right? That's the final goal. I have 11 objectives that I have to complete in order to achieve the final goal, right? This is how the movie ends, guys. This is the end of the story. Is what step 12 talks about, the promises of step 12. And now when I have that understanding, I look at the 12 steps. Right? Step 1 is the problem, alcoholism. Step 2 is the solution. The solution to alcoholism is God. Step 3 is nothing but a decision. A decision to do what, you may ask? Well, it's the decision to seek the solution. 4 through 9 is how I achieve the solution. 10 and 11 are how I grow and live in the solution. And 12 is the pleasure. Page 16, we'll finish up. Many of us exclaim, what an order! Can't go through with it. Do not be discouraged, my friends. No one among us has been able to maintain anything like perfect adherence to these principles. We are not saints. The point is that we are willing to grow along spiritual lines. The principles we have set down are guides to progress. We claim spiritual progress rather than spiritual perfection. Well, and where do I claim this at? Where am I claiming my spiritual progress? That's what step 11 is about. You with me? Our description of the alcoholic, the chapter of the agnostic, and our personal ventures before and after make clear of 3 pertinent ideas. And I'm going to read the ABCs, guys. And I hear this all the time, that these are steps 1, 2, 3. They're not. They're steps 1 and 2. And also hear the little catchphrase, I can't, he can, I think I'll let him, right? And that's great, but I'm not a slogan guy. I'm not into gimmicks and catchphrases. So here are the ABCs, which are the first 2 steps, and I'll show you. A, that we're alcoholic, could not manage our own lives. That's step 1. B, that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism. Step 2. And then C, that God could and would if he were sought. Again, step 2. So step 2 has 2 parts, and it's also a promise, right? The 2 parts are about powerlessness and insanity, which is in essence the first step. And here's the promise. See, step 2 is a promise that I could be restored to sanity, right? And just because I've read step 2 with my sponsor doesn't mean I'm restored to sanity. Just because I believe in God, it doesn't mean that I'm restored to sanity. I have to do the work in this book to be restored to sanity. And if step 2 is a promise, do you know where the promise comes to fruition? Well, that's exactly what step 10 is about, right? We have the 10-step promises. When it says, for by this time sanity will have returned, that's step 2 coming to fruition in our lives. So at the end of the ABCs, it then says, being convinced, we were at step 3. So this is where step 2 ends, and we'll pick back up on step 3, guys. So thank you so much for joining me today. I've had just a blast studying this book with you guys. I just love this. I get so excited. I'm going to drop in my email again, recoveredalcoholic1939@gmail.com. Questions, comments, concerns, looking for sponsorship. Also, if you haven't had an opportunity to please like, subscribe, and share the channel, it would help us out wonderfully. And from the bottom of page 164, may God bless and keep you until then. So take care and much love.